From Social Prosperity Partners, this is Community Catalysts. Welcome to Community Catalysts, the podcast about the many paths and forms of local leadership. I'm your host, Matt Lehrman. Today, I'm honored to share an extended conversation with Speaker Don Scott of the Virginia House of Delegates, recorded live on May 23rd as part of the Spring 2025 Leadership Dialogues hosted by RELI, the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative at George Mason University's Schar School of Policy and Government. You can also watch the full interview on YouTube. Just click the link in the program notes.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative's dialogue with Virginia House of Delegates Speaker Don Scott. We're so pleased to have Speaker Scott with us today. As many know, the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative is a program at the Schar School of Government and Policy and Government here in Northern Virginia. This is our 8th year of programming, and our programming is all designed to support elected and appointed leaders in the Northern Virginia region. We're grateful to AT&T for being RELI's lead sponsor in 2025. And as I said, we're really excited to have the third of our Leadership Dialogue series today with our special guest, Speaker Don Scott. So let me tell you just briefly about him. If you live in Virginia, you probably know a lot of this, but this will be podcast across the country. From the courtroom to the Commonwealth's capital, Speaker Don Scott is all about breaking barriers and paving the way for the next generation. He's a man who has overcome adversity, and he brings those experiences to his advocacy and legislative actions, all designed to address the needs of Virginians. Raised by a single mother of 6, Speaker Scott's journey took him from the Navy to LSU's law school and then on to the Virginia House of Delegates. He was elected in 2019, and he quickly rose to leadership, becoming the House Democratic leader in 2022 and making history in 2024 as Virginia's first Black Speaker of the House of Delegates. I also want to take a moment to introduce today's moderator, Matt Lehrman. Matt's a civic facilitator, mediator, and speaker whose firm, Social Prosperity Partners, specializes in helping municipalities and school boards across the country navigate complexity, resolve conflict, and strengthen civic trust. He also hosts the Community Catalyst podcast, which explores real-world lessons in leadership. And his podcast does include a monthly RELI-sponsored episode that focuses on the challenges and opportunities facing Northern Virginia. Our 2 previous dialogues, one with Senator Tim Kaine and one with former Mayor of Alexandria, Justin Wilson, along with this interview with Speaker Scott, will be part of the Community Catalyst podcast. So one tiny bit of housekeeping. If you're here and have a question, please use the Q&A function during the interview. We'll be paying attention to those and we'll work them in as he can. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Lehrman and Speaker Don Scott.
Mary, thank you very much. And thank you again to the Regional Elected Leadership Initiative for creating this forum. And again, let me also welcome those of you who are in our live virtual audience. And again, use the Q&A function, ask your questions there. I will be monitoring throughout, and I will ask your questions to the speaker as well. Mr. Speaker, thank you for being here. And it's an honor to speak with you. And for people who may be listening later, it's also the day before Memorial Day, so we should recognize that, and I should begin by saying thank you for your service.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you all for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation. A very interesting time in our country and here in the Commonwealth of Virginia specifically, so I'm excited about this conversation that we're about to have.
Thanks. So let me set the stage for everyone just to make sure. Over the last few months, on behalf of RELI, I've had the honor of facilitating focus groups with local elected officials from across Northern Virginia. And, what we heard loud and clear, and Mr. Speaker, I'm sure this is no surprise to you, is that communities are under real strain. Federal policy shifts are hitting local budgets, they're stretching capacity, they're shaking trust. And it's not just government's under pressure, it's families. People are facing job losses and economic and uncertainty and real fear about what's ahead. And so Mary just mentioned that in this spring dialogue series, 3 weeks ago today, we spoke with Senator Tim Kaine. And 2 weeks ago, we spoke with former Alexandria Mayor Justin Wilson, and each offered reflections on what this moment demands of public leadership. You took a major step last February by forming the Emergency Committee on the Impacts of Federal Workforce and Funding Reductions. By the way, the title of that is just a mouthful. I had to practice that. And you've charged it to complete its work by November 15th and produce a final report for the 2026 General Assembly by December 15th. Mr. Speaker, when you announced it, you said, this is not about politics. It's about protecting Virginia's workforce, economy, and essential services. I want to ask you just to begin right there. From your vantage point, what's at stake right now for Virginia?
What's at stake is our continued prosperity, our shared prosperity, regardless of party affiliation. We have an opportunity, I think, to look at how these impacts will hit Virginia. And I think we have an opportunity to continue to try to diversify our economy, but also make sure that we are very responsive where we can be. And I think that's why we had to do something. To do nothing, I think, would have been malpractice. And I think we have to do something to be prepared for 26. As you're noticing right now, I think yesterday, the House of Representatives passed a very, very harsh budget bill that will impact hundreds of thousands of Virginians' health care. Those folks who are food dependent, that are need food stamp assistance, is going to impact the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program called SNAP. Those things, we're talking about $1 trillion of cuts just for the most vulnerable. And we know that that's going to trickle up to those of us who think we're safe. It's going to trickle up and hurt all of us. So I think in this moment, it demands that we have sober-minded planning and sober-minded thought and not get caught up in the hyperbole that is easy to get caught up in. We could be talking about planes getting bought from other countries or anything, but that's not what Virginians are worried about. They're worried about making sure that they can afford the things that they need for their families, making sure that they can take their kids to a good public school, a safe public school, an excellent public school, and making sure their communities are safe. So this is an opportunity, I think, for us to look at what is, and not just Northern Virginia. I know I'm in Hampton Roads. I'm looking out my window right now there are Navy ships here in the Elizabeth River outside of my office. So I'm looking here. And so we're going to have a huge impact in Southwest Virginia, rural Virginia, here in Hampton Roads, and then especially in North Virginia, because it's so dependent on the federal contract.
Help me understand the magnitude of what we're talking about here. If this is a 0 to 10 scale, and 1 is something that we can absorb pretty easily, and 10 is a huge magnitude, what's the scale that we're talking about for the impact on all of Virginia?
It's a 10 right now. It's a 10. We're talking about 320,000 federal civilian employees that live in Virginia. Another 190,000 federal jobs are right here in Virginia. 615,000 veterans call Virginia home. That's nearly 10% of our population. We're talking about $109 billion in contracts awarded to Virginia, the largest per capita awarded state in the country. We're talking about 1 in every 7 federal dollars in contracts are spent right here in Virginia. We're talking about 441,000 jobs directly related to Virginia, in Virginia, tied to federal contracting. So I know everybody thinks this is about DC and Nova only, and I love DC and Nova only because that is the economic engine for Virginia, and it's important that we protect it. But it also has a trickle-down impact in Southwest, in Southside, in Central Virginia, and here in Hampton Roads. So these cuts that they're doing are going to have a huge impact. So it's definitely a 10. I heard one commentator, I think it was Supervisor McKay in Fairfax County, who said that these cuts are going to have a more tougher impact than COVID did. And we know what COVID did temporarily to our economy. And there are those who think it's going to be worse. I was up in Northern Virginia meeting with the chamber recently, the Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce. And a lot of those folks voted, for what we have now. And they have buyer's remorse. They all raised their hands that they've been negatively impacted. I talked to one landowner there who's lost literally $1 million in lease space that the federal government was leasing from him and providing programs like USAID and others that have been cut. That space is up in Tyson Corner. That space is in Northern Virginia. And so in Arlington and Alexandria. So I think we know this is a 10 on the scale of a magnitude that how it could impact Virginia. And I hate to go on, Matt.
Yeah, you're fine.
These cuts, they're like sledgehammers. These are not surgical cuts. I don't think I ever want to be in a position, or anybody wants to be in a position of defending inefficiencies. What's made this country great and made us the most productive nation of all of the developed nations is that we've always gotten better. We've always been more efficient. We've always been more productive. We lead the world in productivity. Even now, there are those that's telling us that, America's not productive anymore. No, we continue to lead the world in productivity. We lead Europe, we lead China, we lead Japan in productivity and per capita income per citizen. So I think what they've done is try to spin a false narrative that we're not getting better and that our best days are behind us. And I just don't believe that. I continue to believe our best days are in front of us, but we have to be surgical and not come in with a sledgehammer, or as some people did with a chainsaw. And I think that's
I want to come back and ask you about impact, and I want to kind of share with you some of what we heard in our RELI focus group from local leaders. But before we do that, talk to us a little bit about the committee's process itself and what you expect the committee to do. What makes it inclusive? What makes it thoughtful? What will make that final report compelling? Walk us through what you expect of the committee process itself.
Well, that committee, I appointed David Bulliver, who's from Fairfax County. David is the chair of general laws in the General Assembly. And David is a very thoughtful, sober. If you wanna be bored to death, call David Bulliver. I call him, he makes America boring again. His mouth, make America boring again. But he's also competent. He's also very thorough. And so we put David Bulliver in charge of that committee because I knew that he would not focus on any hyperbole that some of us politicians do. He'll focus on the cold, hard facts. And then we got Rob Bloxham, who's the vice chair from the Eastern Shore of Virginia, because I wanted to have geographical diversity. And those two working together along with several members of both parties. It's a bipartisan committee so that they can all take in the facts. They can have what they've met in Northern Virginia already. I think the first city they went to was Arlington. And then they've gone to Wytheville. And I think they'll be coming to Hampton Roads, somewhere in Central VA. And then they'll end up probably in Danville or somewhere in Southside. I think it's important that we get a comprehensive view from across the entire Commonwealth to figure out how we move forward. They can gather that information to see how our employment levels are going to be impacted, to see how our funding will be impacted, to see how the folks that food shelters get impacted. There are so many, our healthcare gets impacted. So I think after we get and especially our business community and our corporate partners who've all said that they're feeling the downturn right now. So hopefully we'll get all of that information. They'll present that report to us, and then hopefully they will also prescribe some legislative solutions. We've seen this work before. I didn't just do this willy-nilly. When I first was sworn in as speaker, the first committee I formed was a select committee on rural health care to make sure that we address some of the challenges that I saw when I went out to Southwest. And we were able to pass dozens of bills to deal with that, to create telehealth, to include certain things in Medicaid, to be reimbursed, to make sure that we address the healthcare deserts in some of those regions, because we are a Commonwealth. So I think if we follow that same playbook, look at the recommendations for bills, look at the recommendation for legislation and policy prescriptions to solve these problems. That's what I expect from this committee. They're doing the work, and hopefully by the time we swing around next session, we'll have some answers. We may have to respond sooner based on some cuts that the feds may take because we have triggers in our legislation around Medicaid. So we'll see. And we may have to come back for special session. We'll see. That's another issue that we don't know about. A big part of this is information gathering. I think there are some people that just want us to do something when we don't know if that's the answer yet. So we have to make sure that we're asking the right questions, getting the right answers, so then we can look at this thing in a thoughtful way to get answers and give solutions that meet the needs of our Commonwealth. And that's what I'm excited about. We got the right people, not any bomb throwers in there. Everybody's quiet and sober. We're going to get this thing done, and we're going to come back and present a solution that makes sense for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I'm excited.
Is that what you mean when you say that it's not political, that this is factual and it's talking about impacts, and these are things that wherever you are in the political spectrum in the state, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, you should be able to look at this and see this is this is truth. This is actually happening, and we can measure the impact of these changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I want everybody to be able to look at the data. We've had Republicans present. We've had members of the Youngkin administration present. We've had some federal workforce members present. We've had local people present. We've had a combination of folks across the political spectrum present, people that they don't care about their party affiliation. They care about education. They care about healthcare. They care about our workforce. They care about good jobs. They care about keeping Virginia competitive. And that doesn't have a party affiliation. Obviously it's going to have some political impact because people are going to get this information. They're going to make some decisions. But at the end of the day, what we want to do is look at what the uncertainty that's being created, how is it going to impact workforce? How's it going to impact our healthcare system? How's it going to impact our civilian federal workforce? How's it going to impact our veterans? I'm a veteran. I've gone to the veteran hospital. There's a whole lot of layoffs there. It's like a ghost town in some respects. There are people who have a chilling effect on free speech. They don't want to complain because they don't want to lose their job. So we're going to get all of that information. We're going to hear from all of those folks, and we're going to come up with some solutions. So I don't think, like you said, I don't think it's just political. I think it may have a political impact, but I think we have to get the data and we have to agree on what the actual numbers are. And once we can agree on the numbers, or people may look at it and have a different prescription on it, which we, as all of Americans, we're not enemies because we're on the other side of the aisle. We're all Americans but we have different ways of getting to different solutions. So I'm hopeful that if we take a look at the same facts, we may have different political affiliations, but we can look at policy and see what we can come together. And that's what the goal of this committee is.
Mr. Speaker, I have one last high-level question before we get into what we learned from the focus groups. It's kind of a personal question of you, which is, you occupy the office of Speaker of the House of Delegates in this critical time. How do you look at your responsibilities in this moment? What's your role? What's the function that you have to serve that no one else serves in this moment?
Thank you for that question. It's something I think about all of the time.
I bet.
Sometimes life's experiences prepare you for a situation like this, which I consider to be somewhat of emergency here. I've gone through enough adversity. I've overcome enough adversity in my own life to be prepared to face this and not be afraid. And so I think there are a lot of folks across the political spectrum who are wringing their hands. And I just don't believe this is the time for wringing of hands. This is the time for action. This is the time for bold leadership. This is the time to make sure that we capture the right information and make a very thoughtful, sober decision without panicking. And so I think that has prepared me. My life story and journey has prepared me to be in this space at this time. I think I was made for this moment. And so at this time, I'm very grateful to be in this fight, to protect the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I think there are folks who don't understand, like this is amazing history. Like if you're a student of history and you go all the way back, like we're in the middle of some amazing history. This time in America will be written about for generations to come. So I'm just grateful to be in this space, to have a voice in helping craft solutions that will continue this beautiful American journey and preserve and protect our democracy. And I'm looking forward to it.
There's a juxtaposition in what you just said. I just want to make sure I'm hearing you right. I heard time for action and bold leadership, but I also heard in everything that you said before that, which is, but that action and leadership has to be grounded in factual analysis and understanding of implications. Did I summarize that basically?
I think you did. I think there are so many people who are wedded to a viewpoint that some information can't change their mind. And I believe that if you get new information, that you have to change your mind if that information doesn't match what you're thinking. And I think that's what bold leadership is about: gathering information and making decisions on the information, and not just your position that you may hold, or your political affiliation, or the indoctrinated view that you hold. I think you have a duty to look at the information and make decisions to help the most people at the right time.
Mr. Speaker, I keep an eye, every time you see me looking off to the side, I'm looking at questions that are coming in, and someone just asked a follow-up question on this, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask it to you right now. Mm-hmm. It says, it appears that over the course of the last few years, we've seen a marked increase in partisan and warring tribalism in the Virginia House of Delegates. The time-honored Virginia concepts of legislative comity and crossing of the aisle on cooperative legislative matters appears to be gone. Harsh speech and non-constructive political point scoring appear to be the norm these days. So the question is, what can you do as Speaker to restore civility and bipartisanship in the House of Delegates?
That's a great question. I think I have. The minority leader right now in the House of Delegates is a guy named Todd Gilbert. Todd Gilbert he was born in Jasper, Texas, which is the same town that my mother and father are from. I spent most of my childhood. Todd and I are really close. Do we have vehement disagreements on policy? Yes, but we're very cordial. We're very close. I'm in the House of Delegates. There are 100 of us. It's a 51-49 majority. So that means we're only 2 seats difference. So in Virginia, I don't know what they do in DC, but in Virginia, we have a lot of agreement on policy. We have some big deals that we fight about. I mean, those are the same big deals that we've been fighting about as Democrats and Republicans for a long time. But we have a lot more that we agree on. We passed maternal health care. Virginia has a high mortality rate, maternal mortality rate. We passed a omnibus set of bills, omnibus bills we called them, about 12 pieces of legislation. Those bills were bipartisan bills. The governor signed all of them. We brought them and he did his ministerial job, but it was the House of Delegates. We crossed the aisle a lot in the House of Delegates to get things done across. We passed a bill to protect folks from fentanyl overdoses, to make sure that we punish those people who sold drugs to someone that resulted in death. We passed that bill on a bipartisan basis. So there are a lot of bills. The folks just see us argue about those high-level issues, but there are a lot of things that we pass, mostly like 80% of the bills in the House of Delegates pass unanimously. All 100 members vote for them. Then there's another 20% that we fight about, and many of those end up being, about 15% end up being bipartisan, which means somebody from another party join them. And then there's a very smaller percentage that are on a party line vote. And usually they don't end up becoming law because of the Republican governor, and he vetoes most of them. But we'll come back, and that doesn't mean they're bad ideas. It just means like right now in this political climate, we can't pass them. But I think we're in a very good place in Virginia. I can't speak to the national narrative, but in Virginia, I think we've been very cordial. I have a pretty good relationship with the governor. We're able to speak and to talk about issues. We were able to negotiate budgets before. So I think we have a pretty good working relationship, and we understand that, we have some disagreements on policy. But what we've all been pretty good about here in Virginia is we have not gone down the rabbit hole of the politics of personal destruction, going after specific people about something in their personal lives. We kept that off limits for the most part. There's a few exceptions here and there, but for the most part, we haven't. And we've been able to get things done together. And I'm proud of that. I said when I became speaker that I was not the speaker for the Democrats or the Republicans, because all good ideas don't reside with Democrats and all great ideas don't reside with Republicans. And so I'm the Speaker of the House of Delegates. That's the people's house, and it's Republicans and Democrats. And I'm proud of that.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to some of the questions and concerns that were raised in the focus groups. And let me just say right here, I'm not a lobbyist. I'm not here advocating, but you're going to hear in these questions a decidedly Northern Virginia perspective. But I understand your responsibilities are statewide, and I think we're actually interested in hearing, how you think about that. My understanding is Northern Virginia makes up over 40% of the state's GDP, gross domestic product, and is home to you were saying it before, hundreds of thousands of federal employees and contractors. It's a really big footprint. Do you already have an understanding? I know that the committee's work is still underway, but do you have some understanding already of what that big footprint means, not just for the Northern Virginia region, but for the whole of the Commonwealth, what the impact of these federal changes are going to be in Northern Virginia, how they're going to affect statewide?
Absolutely. I mean, as goes North Virginia, as goes the state. I mean, and for the most part, that is the economic engine of Virginia. No one can deny that. Northern Virginia is the economic engine of Virginia. That's the reason that the David Bullover, who's from Fairfax, the largest county in Virginia, was placed at the head of this committee, because I really wanted to make sure that we got all the information we could to make sure that we do everything that we can to address those challenges in Northern Virginia, because we wanted to make sure that we were very aggressive in not only listening to everyone there, but also addressing any needs that we have. We have to make sure that that instability goes across the board. I mean, one of the things that we've learned since we've been doing this, I didn't realize this, that the number one tourists, the most tourists come from Canada. And so despite this trade war with Canada is impacting tourism in Northern Virginia. More Canadians visit Northern Virginia than any other nationality. And so at the end of the day, it's impacting hotel stays, it's impacting real estate, it's impacting entertainment and restaurants. And so we have to take all of that account, the tariffs, the fight, the trade war, whatever you want to call it, it's having a negative impact in Northern Virginia. So we're trying to assess all of that. And so we know that the last time we had a trade war in 2018, it cost U.S. businesses $46 billion. And what I've heard so far is that number has already been doubled so far that what we've gone into. So I think just in this short amount of time, in this almost 5 months that we've been having this trade war. So I think we definitely understand that most of this impact will be felt in Northern Virginia. We need to make sure that we're addressing it.
You mentioned earlier the bill that passed the House of Representatives, I guess yesterday, the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, with so much attention focused on discretionary spending cuts at the federal level, like Medicaid and public education, social services, and transportation. Do you already have a plan, or is there a plan within the General Assembly to protect residents who may be the most vulnerable and maybe even least visible in these budget conversations?
Well, that's why we are examining that. We do not have a plan to do that. That's why we're gathering information so that we can develop a plan. I mean, one of the things that we did do a few years ago, probably 7, 8 years ago, we expanded Medicaid for that middle population, those people who were working but didn't make enough to purchase Obamacare, but made too much to qualify for regular Medicaid. So we had Medicaid expansion. And so we're worried about that being impacted. That's over 700,000 Virginians that get access to Medicaid. And we know that if you don't have health care and you wait to get preventative care, or you wait to only get catastrophic care and be seen in an emergency room, you're going to hurt hospitals. You're going to make us all less safe and less healthy. And so we want to make sure that we protect that. So we're taking that into account. Virginia is in a very good place vis-a-vis other states. I don't know if anybody on the call from Maryland, and I'm not putting Maryland down. I love Maryland. But they had a $3 billion budget deficit. Virginia's had a $3 billion budget surplus because for the last 2 minutes, since I've been here in 2020, we have been very, very, and before I got here even, but we have been very, very consistent about across party lines, making sure that we put money in our rainy day fund when revenues are high. We put money in a reserve emergency fund. That's why we have the type of balance sheet that is the envy of the country, because we've had responsible, thoughtful leadership. Even when we may not have disagreed on some other issues, we've been in agreement that we needed to make sure that we protected our AAA bond rating, that we put away reserves for a rainy day fund. And we even, on top of the rainy day fund, we have another reserve fund to deal with any expected budget shortfalls. Now, mind you, $3 billion is not enough to cover Medicaid expansion. So we'd have to figure out a way that if that Medicaid expansion goes away, we're going to figure out, because that's not enough loan. That's money that's year over year, and a one-time fund won't be able to cover that. So we have some challenges ahead of us if what the bill passed yesterday, if that bill becomes law, we're going to have challenges along with every other state in the country. And those who are most vulnerable will be the ones that feel that impact. That will be children who will be impacted by the loss of the SNAP program, which is a supplemental nutritional assistance program. We used to call it food stamps. That will be impacted. But not only will they be impacted, the farmers that we purchase the food from in rural areas, they'll be impacted because that'll be less money. The SNAP program benefits those who are most vulnerable and our rural communities and those farmers that provide food. So we need to make sure that we're protecting all of them. And I hope that as they move forward, I'll be urging my delegation, and I hope you are too, to push back on some of these cuts.
Mr. Speaker, the reason I asked these two questions here is there is a Sophie's choice. There's a really hard decision to make, and it's probably not an either-or decision, right? Mm-hmm. But I wonder if you could kind of help us understand how you and how a member of the House of Delegates even begins to address this question of, in this moment of change, given, one direction is you got to support Northern Virginia and its economic engine and how it fuels the state. And on the other hand, you have communities, maybe even elsewhere in the state, that are going to be severely impacted, and people are going to be hurting and and health is, and lives are on the line. How do you balance those two imperatives that are both important? How do you decide what the balance of priority, the funding, whatever is going to be in that situation?
I mean, I think it's a very difficult situation, but I think we can do it. I think we have to do it. We have to make some choices, and there may be some short-term choices that we are forced to make, and then there's some long-term choices that we'll be able to make. I mean, I often go back to my Donald Rumsfeld days. I don't know if you remember Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of
Sure.
Defense, doing Iraq, and he said there were known knowns, and then there are known unknowns, and then there are unknown unknowns. And I think right now we're getting a handle on what we do know, the known knowns, and we kind of have an understanding of, hey, we're wondering what's going to come down the pipe, those known unknowns, but they're going to become knowable. And then there are unknown unknowns, those things that we don't know and we're never going to know until it actually hits us. And that's where we are right now. And I think as we get ready to make these plans to figure out where we need to go, those are going to be the decisions. But we have to make sure that we have to make sure that we protect the entire Commonwealth, because we're all in this together. But we know that a big part of the Commonwealth's vitality comes from Northern Virginia. The big part of Hampton Roads' vitality comes from the Defense Department. There are things that impact us and that we need to make sure that we're doing. I mean, this trade war is going to impact us. I was looking at our offshore wind project here. They said it's going to add the trade war alone is going to add an additional $500 million to the cost of the offshore coastal wind project being done here in Virginia Beach. So we know that it has a real cost and it'll come out of our pockets, because that's the way this thing works. It gets passed down to us. It'll become a tax on us. And so we just have to anticipate what that is. I don't know all of those answers yet. That's a great question. And that's why we had that task force, so that we can get those answers. And so we have some forecasts. Literally, I just talked to an economist yesterday and I asked him, hey, how can you, and he does a report every year about what our economy looks like. He said he can't even do the report this year because it's so chaotic. He doesn't know how to plan for what may come or what may not come. So a lot of this, we're going to end up seeing the impact and have to build back what was lost that we could not have anticipated. So I'm hoping for the best, that it's not as devastating as some folks believe it will be. And I hope that we'll be able to deal with it. But if not, I think if any state can deal with it, Virginia can. And I think we're in a position, because of our balance sheet, to be able to at least short term absorb some things, and maybe the long term will be a different answer.
Mr. Speaker, you will not be surprised that I got a question that just came in that asked it this way. I'm going to ask it to you just as it was asked to me. Given that Northern Virginia money goes to Richmond for redistribution, is there a willingness to look at allowing more of that money to stay invested in Northern Virginia?
Oh my God, that's a good one. I don't like the premise. I disagree with the premise of the question. And I'll say it like this. We are a Commonwealth. That means we're all in this together. I don't buy into this whole notion of redistribution. We all benefit. When Southwest Virginia is healthy, Northern Virginia is healthy. When Northern Virginia is healthy, South Side is healthy. When South Side is healthy, Hampton Roads is healthy. We're all in this together. I don't buy the premise that I'm going to keep my little pie to myself. I think we made a decision as Virginians to all be in this together. And I would hate to go to a situation where everybody's only worried about themselves. We all benefit when we're all doing well. Rising tide lifts all boats. And I hope that we will continue to be the great Commonwealth that we have built. And Northern Virginia benefits from having the entire Commonwealth, as well as the entire Commonwealth benefits from Northern Virginia.
Mayor, in our focus groups, I asked local leaders to describe how they're feeling in emotional terms. And as you might imagine, we heard shaky on the one hand, we heard steadfast on the other. I'm curious to ask how you would describe the emotional atmosphere within the General Assembly right now, and is that tension something that you see on both sides of the aisle?
Yeah, I believe that's some anxiety. If that was the word I would use, it'd be anxiety. And mainly because we can't predict what's going to happen. We're anxious. We're trying to get the information that we need to make good decisions by our constituents. We have 100 members in the House of Delegates, another 40 in the Senate. And all of us are trying to do the best that we can across both sides of the aisle. I have, when I went out to Southwest Virginia in November of 2023, after we'd won the election, and I had been elected nominated to become speaker, the first thing I did was went out to Southwest. I stayed in the home. My wife and I stayed in the Republican senator's house, and we got to see. I know for a fact that there are people of goodwill across the Commonwealth. There are people of goodwill across the aisle that want to do well. Of course, we hear only the news, and we all kind of do our thing, and we all have to, identify and contrast ourselves from our opponents on the other side of the aisle. But like I said before, they're not our enemies. And I think what we have to do in General Assembly anyway, I think we have to continue to talk to one another, which I think we're doing. I don't think it is when anything like the DC environment. In the Virginia General Assembly, we speak to one another. I talked to Republican colleagues today about ideas for next session after the election, things that they might want to bring up in November, whether we're in the majority or not. So I feel confident that Virginia's up to the task to meet the needs. And I think in the General Assembly, the folks are up to the task. We feel some anxiety coming from the feds because we're so close to DC and we have so much of our economy intertwined with the federal economy. But I think we're up to the task and we're prepared to meet the needs of the Commonwealth.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to ask you this question again because I don't think I set it up particularly well, and I want to see if I can't get an even more personal, kind of emotional response on this. When I talk to leaders who serve on county boards and city councils and school boards, the anxiety that I hear from them, it's personal, and there are elements of being fearful that somehow their municipality or their district is going to fail at providing essential services for real people, that real people will get hurt, that critical services will stop in some way. I'm not saying that it's imminent and it's about to happen somewhere. I'm just talking about the emotional state that they're feeling. Mm-hmm. Look, the State House is removed, right? It's a higher altitude of democracy than in local government. So I would understand if people who serve in the House of Delegates don't quite feel that same imperative. But I want to give you another bite at that apple and tell me, are they just, is it so removed that they just don't feel that, or does that emotional resonance, does it ring true at the State House?
Oh no, it absolutely. Like I said, I think most of the members are very anxious. We have people. I think folks need to understand. We have a member who just had an infant during last session. She had to vote from her, after she had the baby. Literally, she was the next day or the day after she was voting from her home. She's a new mom, a young mom. So do we have people who are afraid, who have economic anxiety? Absolutely. It's not. So when I talk about the anxiety that members have, part of it is like legislatively what I'm going to do, but also personally, everybody is struggling. These people, everybody in General Assembly, they're working. We're working moms. We have people some who may have lost their jobs. We have people who've been impacted by what's happening right now with the federal government. We have people who've lost contracts, who've been laid off. So we actually are feeling the impact personally across the board. And I think there are people from both sides of the aisle who are feeling that impact. But from a legislative standpoint, I think people know that they have a job to do and they're up to the task. And that's good.
Mr. Speaker, some Northern Virginia leaders feel that their communities are being targeted because of who lives there and what the region represents. Do you think that's a fair concern?
I think it's fair. I don't know if it's true, but I think that's fair to look at whether, every day I think, a lot of Northern Virginia has been very successful and have not voted with this current administration. And so I think there is some folks who may be, targeting some of those districts, some of that area in a special way. And I think it happens a lot. You can see it right now with school boards. I mean, I think Loudoun County and Fairfax were under special scrutiny because of the positions and where they're located. And I think they're trying to make some inroads and amplify that. But I think that's politics. And hopefully that people will not be trying to, at the end of the day, hopefully folks will not be trying to, kill this economy because of politics. And I hope that's not the case. But I think it's a fair assessment to think that might be true because, that's what it looks like in some respects. When people start talking about we're going to move headquarters from this city because, we don't like your politics, that's a problem.
There's an argument that is, the administration is trying to, they've been very explicit about this, trying to put federal workers under stress so that they don't want to have those kinds of jobs. One of the ways of putting them under stress is putting their communities under stress so that It's not just that their professional employment, it's that the economies of their communities make them want to leave the area, make it harder to recruit other people here. I want to be careful that I don't, get into hyperbole, but do you see that as an attack on not just on the federal workforce, but as an attack on Northern Virginia, on attack on the viability of its communities?
I don't see that as an attack. I said I understand how some folks may see that, but I don't see it as an attack. I see it as really irresponsible, some of the things that folks are doing and not understanding, maybe that it's going to have a detrimental long-term impact, not only on Virginia, but on the country. I mean, I think people fail to understand, like we have the largest naval base in the world here in Norfolk, Virginia. We build ships, we build things, we protect our country. So when you impact the Northern Virginia, where we have some of the largest industries that protect our country, then you're really undermining our national defense. So I just think sometimes some of these games people are playing, they may not have the intended impact that they think it will. It can be nasty and it can hurt the country. So I'm hopeful that sooner or later, cooler our heads will prevail. People will appeal to their better angels. But I think at this time, yeah, it may look that way. I don't believe that their goal is to destroy Virginia's economy and destroy Northern Virginia's economy. But I believe that that may be having an impact, and we have to respond. I think this is not the time, to lean into the hyperbole and to overreact. I think this is the time to stay focused on what I think Virginians have always been able to do, which is rise above the noise, rise above the BS, focus on the facts, put people first. And whether you're in education or business or healthcare or government or whatever we're doing, we all need to stick in this together. That's why I was so concerned to hear somebody say, let Northern Virginia do its own thing and let these people do. No, I think we have to continue to grow as a Commonwealth, stay in this together, because I think, some folks want to divide us. And I think we have to stay together, which is why this committee, I could have easily just put Democrats on this select committee. But I created a committee where I put a chair and a vice chair, and the vice chair is a Republican, because I want him to have the same amount of responsibility and accountability when this thing comes out. Nobody can run and say they were not involved to getting the answers that we need. And so they'll be just as accountable for hurting Virginia as anybody else if they don't make a response. So we all in this together. Democrats, it's not just Democrats that love Virginia. There are Republicans that love Virginia. So I'm hoping that when we get us all together, we can continue to grow and stick together as a Commonwealth.
There's a philosophical question. I will tell you, I have lost sleep trying to get my head around this, and I'm not even sure that I could answer it. But I'm going to ask you, because maybe you can help me better understand it. We're clearly witnessing a dismantling of significant portions of the federal government. And the real question is about the intention and as you said before, the impact. So I'm thinking there's just two scenarios, and I'm wondering if you recognize both of them or if you see it differently. Is this dismantling of the federal government, is this meant to be a shift that state and local governments can absorb into their existing systems? Or is it a disruption that is so intentionally significant that it will ultimately force structural transformation at every level of local government?
Well, I think two things can be true at the same time. Okay. I think what you said, I think both of those things are true. I think one, that this is going to be an opportunity for local and state government to take on more responsibility for creating solutions. And obviously the federal government is saying we're going to push everything down to the states. The problem is we don't know where the resources will come with those problems that come. And so we don't have a problem with dealing with the problems. We make sure we get the resources as well. And then the other piece, I think it is going to force us to take a look at our structure, how we govern, how we move forward, how we solve problems. And I think we'll be able to do that. I just think, if you look at, we were talking about specifically Virginia, but it's not just hurting Virginia. The whole U.S. economy contracted in the first quarter. The stock market lost trillions. And so Virginia's not immune from feeling that same thing that everybody else in the country felt. And so I think, that's why I say I don't believe that it's intentional just for Virginia. This is the whole country. I know shipping containers are down on the West Coast. Shipping containers are down here in where I am at the Port of Virginia. The Northern Virginia Chamber to a person, every single CEO there raised their hand to say that what was happening was negatively impacting them. So I think this is not you know, the own that they think they have by hurting Virginia. They're hurting the country. And so I think, and people are starting to notice. So hopefully if regular everyday people continue to talk and communicate regardless of party affiliation, I think we'll be able to get some solutions. We'll be able to start from the local level up to the federal level. And I'm hoping that's the way it continues to move.
It is a remarkably measured response that you've given. And I have all kinds of respect for it. And I understand, in your position, you are responsible to get a lot of parties, into the conversation. As we were preparing for this interview, people sent me a ton of statistics. I think a number of them came out of the committee's work so far, and I'm not going to recite them, and I'm not asking you to defend them or analyze them or anything on the fly. But the implications of this, I just want to be clear, we can't overstate the seriousness of what this can do to the unemployment rate, to property values, to state and local budgets and bond ratings and you said earlier, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is a 10. So I just want to make sure I'm hearing you right. It's a magnitude 10, but we have to be measured in how we do the analysis and the impact and not let our emotions or not let our partisan divides dictate the response. Am I understanding you?
Absolutely. Don't panic. You know what I mean? I think that's the issue. We can't panic because there are so many people who will be hurt if we move out in the wrong direction, and we move out in a way that's just, I would love to have a feel good moment and go off on, whatever I feel about what they're doing in my disagreements. But at the end of the day, that's not going to put food on the table. It's not going to create any new jobs. It's not going to be able to address those people who are losing their jobs. It's not going to lower people's tax rate for those people who've been harmed. So I think we just got to make sure it's not going to make sure veterans get the care that they need. So I just think we need to make sure that we stay focused, don't go down the rabbit hole of the hyperbole that they are using every day. I think Virginia has been pretty stable over the years because we've been able to do that. We've been the number one state to do business in 6 times because we've been a very sober-minded, fair, inclusive state. And I think we have to continue to do that. And I think for people to overreact, because that's what we would be. I think to overreact would be a mistake. Just because we're 10 and in an emergency, we made it through COVID, and we made it through some issues, and that we've come back. So I think we have to do this. We have to look at this. It's kind of like a pandemic in its own way. We kind of look at this like it's something that can go through, and now we have to be thoughtful. We have to plan. We have to do things that help us stay safe, secure, protect our viability. So when we come out on the other side of this, we'll be stronger. And I think we can do that.
I think you got a confirmation of this from one of our audience members who writes, staying calm, cool, and collected is how we stay focused and make policy that addresses not just the immediate issues, but long-lasting solutions that survive whomever is in charge.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's why it's so important that we have a bipartisan solution to some of these issues, and at least look at the facts on the ground together, even if we come up with different policy prescriptions. And so I'm excited about everybody I know it's easy to say calm down when you're not in the storm, when you didn't lose your job, when you're not worrying about how you're going to pay your mortgage. But I think other of us who have to make these global decisions, we cannot be panicking, and we have to make decisions that's in the best interest of the majority of the Commonwealth of Virginia, so that we can continue to move forward and come out on the other side of all of this better, have a more diverse diverse economy, making sure that we can take care of our most vulnerable citizens, our elderly, our children, and make sure that we can provide safe health care for everybody and a good quality public education, excellent, top of the line, best in class public education for everybody that wants it.
Gosh, there are 2 questions I want to ask in this moment. I keep thinking that, it's a convention of disaster movies, that there is, it starts with some lonely scientist who spots some signs first when others don't see it. And then the first act of the movie is them trying to warn everyone before it's too late. Do you have any sense that we're in the first act of some calamity right now?
I don't. And I just think I think we're in the middle of what we could be a calamity, but I think we're also in the middle of what I think could be an opportunity. And I think it's an opportunity to open the eyes of a lot of folks about what we do have and how important it is to protect it and preserve it. Sometimes you don't appreciate things until they're gone. And I think there are some people starting to understand what we have. It's going pretty well. Do we have some things that we could continue to work on? Sure. But are we doing pretty well vis-a-vis, relatively speaking? Absolutely. And so I think this is an opportunity and not as much as a time for panic. I think it's opportunity to be thoughtful, be sober, and plan, prepare, and be ready to take advantage of opportunities that present themselves on the other side of this. I guess that's what I was trying to say earlier. I'm kind of excited about the opportunities. I'm not despair. I'm not disheartened. I think this is an opportunity to stand up for what your values are and what you believe. And we'll get to see what on display for everybody to see who's on whose side. And I think that's what's going to happen here. I think we have an opportunity here, and I think there are going to be folks of goodwill from all political spectrums that are going to want to come up with solutions to help us continue to move forward.
So let me ask you to speak directly to our live virtual audience, but to everyone who's listening across the country. So for the most part, keep in mind you're speaking to Northern Virginia people, but possibly others, elsewhere. What advice would you give them? Because we heard in our focus groups, there are a lot of people who think that they are the scientist, who's reading that something bad is happening in their community, is imminent, about to happen, and they're trying to call attention to it. What would you like local leaders in Northern Virginia to know about how to engage with you, to engage with their representatives at the State House? What's productive? What's useful in this moment for local leaders to make sure that their perspective is getting through?
Well, I think the number one quality, I think, of any local leader, any leader, is to have empathy for the people that you serve for, people that you're serving. I think there are some folks who may not understand that I think that's the most important trait. It's not just quote unquote leadership. It's not looking like a leader. It's not sounding like a leader. It's caring about the people that you're serving. And I think to be caring means to be engaged. And you talk about how do you engage? If you care, you're going to be engaged. And you want to be engaged in a positive, productive partnership, regardless of your political affiliation. There are ways that you can communicate with people like me and others. Give us the information. Give us an opportunity to respond. Give us an opportunity to implement if it's something that needs to be implemented. And I think the more engagement is better than no engagement. This is not the time to put your head in the sand. This is the time for everyone to get involved. And I'm excited about these opportunities. And I'm hoping that all of I like to talk to my city council, my school board, and I talk to city council and county commissioners, talk to some today from across the Commonwealth. So I think that's the opportunity for folks to engage, come up, find out what we're thinking, find out if, hey, I don't think that's a good solution. And here's why. Here's how it's going to hurt me, or here's how it's going to help me. And I think, we're in this together. Nobody's going to get 100% of what they want. I'm an attorney, a trial lawyer, so I'm negotiating all the time. If you get everything you want, then you're living in la la land. We're always negotiating. And I think there's an opportunity for us to get better, to come up with solutions that make housing more affordable, to come up with solutions to deal with hunger insecurity and food insecurity. I think there are ways that we can help folks, hungry people get fed, help folks who are sick get hospital and health care that they need. I'm excited about that. That's the only reason I ran for office. And I'm hopeful that those who are locally serving, that's the only reason that they ran for office too, is that to help people. That's our job.
I want to ask you the same question in the other direction, which is, what would you hope that members of the General Assembly would be doing in this moment to make sure that they understand the challenges that are being faced in local municipalities?
Same thing. Number one, I hope all of them have the empathy to go out and reach out to their communities, especially those communities that may have that anxiety, that may be negatively impacted, and listen to their communities. And more importantly, make sure that they're engaging with the leaders in those communities, especially those people who disagree. I'm one of the people that like to run to a fight, not from a fight. So I don't mind having a disagreement and a conversation with people I disagree with, but I don't take it personal. And so I think as long as we can continue to communicate with each other, we have a chance. I know there are people saying this is the worst it's ever been. This is the worst it's ever been ever. And I try to remind people that was this little thing that started in 1861 called the Civil War, that we fought each other, Gettysburg, Chancellorsville. So I think we're not anywhere near as bad as it's ever been. I think as long as we have the opportunity to continue to speak to one another, have dialogue, continue to educate one another, and continue to respect one another, I think we have an opportunity to continue to move and grow in the right direction.
I'm going to read you the comment that's sitting here in the Q&A as well. It says, agree with speaker's perspective that Virginia is in the best possible position to survive the disaster movie, but out of my long life experience, I'm deeply concerned that the United States is in a disaster movie, the outcome of which we can only make less disastrous.
Well, I respect that view. I just don't believe it. I believe that our best days are ahead of us. For the sake of my daughter and our grandkids in the future, I believe that our best days are ahead of us. I just think we have to, and I think America is still positioned. Even this is a temporary 4 years, and it may do some damage, but nothing is. This is not irreversible. And so everything that we want to do, all of our future goals and dreams as a nation and for the world are still ahead of us. And I think those are opportunities that we still do. So I'm one of those people, I'm an eternal optimist. I'm one of those kids that if you put me in a room full of manure, I'm going to believe it got to be a pony in here somewhere that we're going to ride out on. So that's my mentality.
You started by talking about it being a time for action, bold leadership, but grounded in analysis and understanding. Is there anything more? This is kind of the final word here. Is there anything more that you want to say on that topic before we wrap up our conversation?
Yeah, I just believe that this is not the time for just the partisan line. I use the partisan line a lot because it is a little chaotic out here. It is a little, it looks like a little corruption out here. It looks like it's some cruelty that people are having fun at other people's expense. And I don't like bullies. But I also think this is a time for everybody to stand up. And I think it's going to come down to everyday people. There's not going to be some leader that we can all jump behind because everybody keeps looking for a leader that's going to come and lift us all up. It's going to come down to everyday people working hard in their communities, talking to one another. That's going to get us back to where we need to be. We stop talking. We got to get off Instagram and Facebook and go back to talking to one another, stop texting and talk to normal people and communicate with one another. And I think that's the way America will come out of this. We need to start talking to one another. We need bold leadership. We can't be afraid to say what's on our minds. People want to hear the truth. They want to hear authenticity. And I think if you bring that, they'll follow.
Speaker Don Scott, thank you so much for being open to this conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. You asked a lot of tough questions. Next time I want the easy ones.
We'll hopefully we'll get to easier times. Let me just wrap up before I invite Mary back. I see that she's joined us, but let me just also say a thank you to RELI, the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative, for bringing us all together, and to everyone who joined us live. Thank you for your interest and participation. A powerful message has come through loud and clear in all these conversations that the future of democracy doesn't just depend on what happens in Washington. It depends on what happens in town halls and school board meetings and community gatherings throughout Northern Virginia, throughout the Commonwealth, and frankly, throughout the nation. Speaker Scott reminds us that the strength of our democracy is built every day by how we show up for one another and how we work together to move forward. His creation of the Emergency Committee on the Impacts of Federal Workforce and Funding Reductions, it's a powerful example of that kind of leadership, action, grounded in analysis and understanding. Mr. Speaker, I applaud you for that work, and we'll all be paying attention. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. I thank you all for being a part of this vital conversation, for all you do to lead your community. And now I return it back to Mary Hines for a final announcement.
Thanks very much, Matt. And Speaker Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. As a former local elected official, I feel inspired by your optimism, and I thank you for sharing that with all of us. And thanks to Matt for conducting yet another great interview. I do have one word for all of the elected officials and other leaders who joined us today, which is please hang in there. Staying focused, being measured in your words and your actions, and always keeping people at the center of your work is the way forward for all of us. And we are all in this together. And I want to say we're all rooting for you. as you do your work and help guide our Commonwealth and your local communities. RELI will be back in the fall with another series of webinars focused on important policy issues in the Commonwealth. Our first one will be on data centers. And please check out the Community Catalyst podcast. Thanks again. See you in the fall.
Many thanks to RELI, the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative at George Mason University's Schar School, for inviting me to lead this conversation and for their continued sponsorship of the Community Catalysts podcast. It is a privilege to help amplify the voices of local leaders across Northern Virginia. And thanks again to Speaker Don Scott for his clarity and candor. His perspective reminds us that bold leadership isn't about reacting loudly. It's about planning thoughtfully, acting decisively, and staying grounded in facts, even amid uncertainty. If you found this episode meaningful, please rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Your feedback helps others discover the show, and don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. If you have a question or a comment about today's conversation, I'd love to hear from you. Reach me at 602-688-2724 or Matt, M-A-T-T, at socialprosperity.us. And do you have a story to share about your own journey to leadership, one that's inspiring, instructive, or perhaps even both? Click the podcast guest link in the show notes. I'm always looking for thoughtful voices and real-world experiences to feature. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with another Community Catalyst.